I'm Elizabeth Addison, and it's wonderful to be in conversation with my friend and colleague, Priscilla Birge. We are members together at NCWCA, Northern California Women's Caucus for Art. And we see each other, or we used to see each other prior to COVID, once a month with our various breakfast groups at Cafe Layla. And we're also, yeah, we're co-members of CALA, Art
Mhm.
Institute as well. We have a lot in common. So, and I've always loved your work. I've always wanted to be an artist. I mean, from the moment I started having a recognizable inner dialogue, I started drawing very young, I think 2 or 3 years old. I was a lefty from the beginning, not only politically, but handedness. and and uh and like you, I had a parent that really nurtured that side of me in a very gentle way, and that was my father, who I know had great artistic talent, but didn't get to realize that until his late 60s. And he nurtured it in me in a very practical way. Um, and I'll talk about that later. But yes, from a very early age, I remember, in the home my parents rented for us outside of Chicago, um, that it was dusty at times, especially in the winter time in the low light. And I remember just noticing all the little motes and dust specks, with that winter light filtering through, and just sort of feeling a presence, in the way the light came through the window, these floating specks, and a sense of sort of macro micro connectivity. Could these little floating specks be little planets or little worlds? Are we a dust speck in someone else's or some other universe? And I remember thinking about this a lot as a kid, and also the best way I could express myself was in drawing. And it was a little chaotic, my early life, sharing a room with three sisters in a small house. And and I remember once just wanting to run away because my sisters were really bothering me, and they were making me so angry, and I wasn't articulate. I couldn't express myself. I was just pissed. So I packed a little suitcase, and I don't know what it was, some little box, and I left the house in Evanston on Central Avenue, which was a busy street, and started walking around the block. And my father chased after me and walked with me. And in his wonderful way, um, he started asking me, why I was so angry, and what was I thinking. And I couldn't really address the anger, but it was more like, well, do you think we could, I was kicking up the dust on the side of the road or the dirt in the parkway, and I was saying, could one of these pieces of dirt be a planet in another universe, and what was I, 6, 7, and vice versa, and just sort of the interconnectedness of the micro and macro realms. And 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 that has stuck with me all these years. You know, I'm almost 65. It's still very, very important to me. We I grew up in a time and in the Midwest where it was important to fit in, and my mother always wanted us just to fit in and assimilate. And when they moved us to a suburb that was predominantly white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and upper middle class, even though I go through life as a white woman, I really had moments of extreme marginalization. You know, my artwork was very illustrative of what was around me, like the squirrels, the people, the girls with straight hair. And then finally having a space. to express myself when I was 12. I think I was 12 because, yeah, it was 1968 and we were sitting in home ec, probably the first week of school. So we're waiting for the teacher, the home ec teacher, because we were, as girls, required to take home ec. Um, and her name was Irene Niebauer. And she came into the room and she had like this white turban or something on her head. And she looked at us and we were all excited. These little girls, these 12-year-olds in a room. We had our sewing kits and she just asked us to put our sewing kits down. And she said, girls or ladies or something like that, we're not going to sew today. I'm going to talk to you about women's lib, civil disobedience, and the pigs. She had been injured in the Grant Park riots, and the white turban was a bandage. And she also became my art teacher in high school. She left the middle school and finally got to teach art. She was an artist, but was stuck teaching home ec. But what she did is when we were learning how to print on fabric, for instance, she taught us various techniques, everything from potato prints to lino cut. But what she would do was bring in historical and feminist context that changed my life.
I can believe it.
I think that's also where my love for printmaking really blossomed. I always loved the idea of mediating what you see. Like if I saw a landscape or an animal, and I would draw it as a child, I would mediate it somehow, like give it human emotions or different colors, what was readily apparent. Um, and printmaking allowed me to do that too, to take an image and it transcended its obvious form. And in high school, I took, I think it was etching. There was an etching course and there was print shop, which usually only the boys got to take. Do you remember that?
I remember well, and I think that's why I went to a art-oriented high school, because I complained to my mother. I said, it's a jip that I'm a girl because the boys get to do all the good things.
But at some point, things changed, and print shop and various other, I guess, electives that were formerly just for boys opened up to girls too. And we had a microbiology elective, which also was fascinating to me. All I wanted to do was look in a microscope. And just like I said, from an early age, the interconnectedness between the micro and macro realms has always fascinated me. And what do you do with those interesting patterns? You're looking at protozoa and creatures and hydras and all these things, and then you see the similarities on a larger scale, or even in a cosmic kind of sense. My father, as encouraging as he was, always told me that you'll never make a living as an artist and you have to have a profession. And of course, my two favorite things were art and music, right? So I ended up going into advertising, and really developed a lot of skills for that while I was at Northwestern University, even though I was studying the sciences, and ended up majoring in studio art. Yay. And having wonderful instructors. Um, the the practical experience I received working at the Daily Northwestern, which was the journalism school's newspaper, you know, really had me set for a career as soon as I left. And I got into editorial cartooning and illustration and became their art editor for a year. I also started illustrating books for my professors, namely one of my anthropology professors whose books were um, published by Harvard Press, because not only did I get to work with amazing images, he provided photography for me to work from, but I ended up working with some of it. Working with his images really opened a new world for me. That's when you were working with photographs, you could make codoliths. Do you remember that?
I do.
We had some marvelous painters who came and taught at Northwestern. That included Sylvia Slee.
I knew Sylvia Lee.
Oh, you did.
I did. I did.
Wow.
Part of my encounter with the feminist movement, and her husband Lawrence Alloway. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I knew them both. Been to their homes. They came out here, or Lawrence came out here. I saw him out here.
Well, she was incredibly influential.
Really. Mm-hmm.
And
Weren't you fortunate?
was I ever?
Mm.
Yeah. And I remember her teaching painting
Mm-hmm.
and how she would always do an underpainting with green lines. And I don't know, that's always stuck with me. And sometimes that's how I work. I use like weird colors as underpaintings, like, but yeah, her method was super interesting in the fact that she was doing the nudes and the men and shifting the gaze.
Right, right.
So did you know her personally
I knew her personally.
Wow.
Not for a long period of time, but we met up in New York a couple of times, and I don't know. I can't remember how we met, whether it was in New York or whether it was at Cal Arts Valencia. I doubt if she was there, but somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
Probably when I was in New York with Patricia Tavener on some occasion. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yes.
Lucky you too. Well, how cool. One more thing we have in common.
Really fortunate. They had the most beautiful garden. They had a basement apartment, and on the opposite the street side is a nice little garden. And they're British, and Brits are really good at gardening. And it was beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had such a talent for pattern and composition. And and that's what I really appreciated about her painting
Mhm.
is that it it felt like a tapestry to me, even though it was figurative. There was a certain flatness to it, which was intentional.
Mhm.
And then the underpainting with the colors that some people would consider gaudy. Because I remember one painting teacher telling me um, that my colors were garish.
Mhm.
But with her, hey, and
Right.
then discovering Wayne Thiebaud and all those people, it's like, no, I'm good. But when people give you that kind of feedback, it's hard to shake.
It's confusing.
It really is.
Yeah.
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 But she was fantastic. And then there was Ed Paschke.
Mhm. I didn't know him.
Ed Paschke Ed Paschke was another one of our painting instructors at Northwestern. Um, he had quite a following. He was a cult figure, one of the most influential teachers I had at Northwestern. Wasn't a big name. He was a young man who taught printmaking and managed the printmaking studio at Northwestern. His name was Tim Ade. It was a wonderful segue from high school, where I had limited access to printmaking of any kind, but really loved it, to this wonderful studio with an etching press, silk screen, you name it, a photo studio. And he nurtured my interests in a wonderful way. And that really set the stage for my advertising career.
Uh-huh. How long were you in advertising?
Oh gosh, I went to work for Macy's, California as an art director. I moved to San Francisco in 1978 and worked in advertising. I think no, it was after my second daughter was born. So it must have been 1998. So it was about 20 years. And then I started teaching. And then where I was teaching at a private school, I also did their annual reports and corporate communications and all of that as well. So
Multi-talented.
it was a living.
Yes, yes,
It was a living.
sure, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But yeah, so some of what I call my early monotypes from the late 90s, early 2000s, um, those are an outgrowth of my issues and loves involved with my advertising career. Because I'm using images, especially of women, for those early ones. And I was also going through a divorce at that time. So it was really about establishing my agency
Mhm, mhm.
and who I was as an individual, and and about how women are objectified and packaged by society at large.
You put it very well. Mm, mm,
Yeah. And what I really loved doing was taking those images out of context, and a lot of people do that now. and and those were my most successful images. And I really owe, my career as a practicing artist now at this point in my life to two people, and one of them is Janet Lipkin, who's a local artist, and Sherry Ma, who you probably know as well. And it was Sherry who came to my house one day and brought a babysitter, and she just pulled me out of my house and took me to Janet Lipkin's free monotype workshop at the JCC in Berkeley in 1998 or 97 or something. And that's how I became a practicing artist today. But until recently, I haven't been able to practice art on a regular
mhm.
basis, but now I can. And I'm so lucky. And
Yeah,
I
yes.
and it's the best life. It's not the easiest life, but it's the best.
I agree. I agree.